Grace Point, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Or if you're watching online, good afternoon, evening, however, whenever you're watching this. We love you. We're glad you're here. Y'all want to stand with us? Yeah. Let's sing together. We're all in this together, following each other, carrying each other's burdens. Yeah, feels good. Here we go. Go on, lay your troubles down. Set your feet on solid ground. Peace deep as I have found. I want to follow you. Come on, all you weak and weary. Come round now if you can hear me. Poor, sick, and God-fearing. I want to follow you. I said I want to follow. Here we go. Leave all of your trouble. Leave all of your sorrow. Set down your burden. Come on and follow. Come on, heavy lady. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Go on, leave your worries too. But not a bit of good they do. There's a word that's coming through. Go on, leave your worries too. So I'll call your name in the middle of the night. I want to know, can you hear my cry? June heat and moonlight. Well, I want to follow you. I said I want to follow you. Leave all of your troubles. Leave all of your sorrow. Set down your burden. Come on and follow. Come on, happy lady. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Ooh. Oh, set your burdens down. Set your burdens down. Set your burdens down. Here we go. Leave all of your trouble. Leave all of your sorrow. Set down your burden. Come on and follow. Come on, happy lady. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Oh, come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Oh, leave all of your troubles. Leave all of your sorrow. Set down your burden. Oh, come on and follow. Come on, happy lady. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Oh, come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Grace Point, thank you so much for being with us today. We want to make sure that you know that you are safe here, you are loved here, celebrated, all the things. We're so glad you're with us. What we'd love for you to do right now is talk to somebody beside you or across the room, make a friend. I see some faces that I've not talked to, so I'm going to be out there. We love you. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Make a friend.
Good morning. Wow, that was nice. Good morning. My name is Emily, and I'm the Director of Operations here at Grace Point. Just a couple of announcements for you. If you're new here and wanting to get plugged in, scan this QR code that is on the screen. You can fill out our Connect card, which will be where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, which goes out every Friday, and where you can get plugged into all the things I'm about to talk about. YAM, which is our 20s to 30s social meetup, meets this Thursday at the Wedge at 6:30. The Wedge is right next door on the other side of this wall. It's just a very social, laid-back situation, so if you want to meet new people, come and join us. GP students are going to an escape room next Sunday. That's 6th through 12th grade. It's going to be immediately following second service. You can email Tiffany at gracepoint.net for more information, or just talk to Tiffany, who's right there. GP College and Kids have made bags to give out to our unhoused community, and they are back by the kids' table in the bin. That is what I'm holding right here. It has like water bottles, non-perishables, tissues, things like that. So if you want to take one or a few, then if you're just driving around town, you can give them out. Grace Point's goal is to create a safe, affirming, and transformative community. You can text any dollar amount to 84321, go to gracepoint.net/give, scan the QR code, or Venmo us at GracePointTN, and just remember that we are Grace Point with an E at the end. Thanks. Oh yes, kids are dismissed. If you're a child, head over to the kids area.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Channing, pronounced she, her, and February is Black History Month, and we want to take some time each week during this important month to put the focus on Black authors, theologians, and activists who have shaped our country in meaningful ways. Today we continue with Howard Thurman. Thurman was born in 1899 in Daytona Beach, Florida. He was an author, philosopher, theologian, educator, and civil rights leader. He was involved in many movements of social justice in the 20th century. Thurman embraced a theology of radical nonviolence, and his vision for engaging in the work of the civil rights movement through that lens played a significant role in shaping the movement. He was a mentor to many civil rights leaders, among them Martin Luther King Jr. A key work of his to know is Jesus and the Disinherited. Released in 1949, it was a development out of a series of lectures presented by Thurman at Samuel Houston College in Austin, Texas. In the book, Thurman views the teaching of Jesus through the lens and experience of the oppressed and explores nonviolent resistance to oppression. Thurman died in 1981, but his legacy continues to make significant impacts today.
Thank you, Channing. Can I ask y'all to stand with us again? We'd love for you, every week we highlight a significant person in this month. There are also incredible resources that we can make available, Black-owned businesses, all those things in the community. We'd love to encourage you to give back and frequent those places as well, especially, not just this month, but always. But this is a song. We're going to sing a song. It's an old hymn. It's the melody of an old hymn called Be Thou My Vision that we have reimagined, rewritten some lyrics to make them a little more inclusive, a little more relevant to our progressive community. So let's sing this together. Be Thou My Vision. Be Thou my vision, O light of my eyes, guide me through darkness and renew my sight. Show me the beauty in all that I see, all that's before me and all that could be. Yes, we are the same. Reveal the glory of God in each face. Beautiful, thank you. You can be seated.
Hello, Grace Point. You all sound incredible today. Yeah, that was unbelievably wonderful. So a couple things. One, there's a date I want to give you, and I want you to circle it on your calendar, and that would be March 2nd, as long as that's a Saturday. Then I have the right date. I think it's right. March 2nd, we're going to participate in a march here in Nashville with the Poor People's Campaign. So essentially, it's going to be a march that's going to ask for fair wages and health care and sensible laws and fully funded public education. And those sorts of things that really, really matter and that are really, really under attack. And so we would love for you to join us. The information's in our newsletter. We'll give you more information about it as we get closer to the date. But we're going to meet at McKendree UMC, and then there'll be a march to the State House, I think is the way it's going to work. So we'd love for you to join us as we put some feet to our faith in that way. And then today is a pretty big day. It's the Super Bowl. So I thought 9 o'clock was way apathetic about this situation. So let's do this. I'm going to do a real scientific poll. Who just doesn't care? Raise your hand. Okay, so who is just in it for commercials? Okay. Who is for Kansas City? That's me. Who is for Kansas City only because of Taylor Swift? Also me. And to just watch conservative talk media melt down by halftime. Also why I'm in. Who's for that other team that's playing that nobody really cares about? Okay, a few of you. So somebody does care about them, all right. So well, I hope you're disappointed at the end of the day. What? Oh, Usher, yeah. Who's excited for Usher? Okay. I have Taylor Swift tunnel vision. You know what? It'll be fine. Did we say commercials? Does anybody just love the commercials? Is that just a thing for? Yeah, as long as they're good commercials. If they're bad commercials, then I don't support it. So we're going to do something a little different today. If you're in our Facebook group, if you're not, why not? If you're in our Facebook group, I mentioned that we're going to do something a little different today. So one of the things that happens every week is I'll often sit down, stand up, do something up here where I give you a thing called a sermon where there's a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. And it's sort of like I go away all week and work on this, and then I'm like, here, it's like when your cat brings you like a mouse or something. Like I come to you with this gift. And here's the thing. I think that's great and fun and wonderful, but I think sometimes it would be interesting if you were in on the process of how that thing comes to be. So I thought today what I'd like to do is I want us to do the sermon together. So I don't want to just be the talker and tell you what I think this means. I want us to sort of do this in tandem. Are you down for that? I have nothing else planned, so I really need you. This also takes so much pressure off me because if it doesn't go well, it's on all of us. It's not just on me. So I'm now sharing some of that pressure with you. And so we're going to be in a text in Mark chapter 5. We're in a series on the Gospel of Mark called Good News at the End of the World, because when Mark wrote Mark's Gospel for Mark and Mark's community, the world had ended. When the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the Jewish temple, their world ceased to operate the way their world had ceased to operate, had always operated. And so Mark is essentially saying, even when the world is ending around you, there's still some good news to be heard and to be shared. And so we're exploring what that is. We're taking a chapter a week. We're sort of going over it and then deep diving a particular story, a particular idea. This week we're going to be in Mark chapter 5. And here's what I'd like us to do. I'm going to read this text. But as I read it, I would love for you, if you have a phone or if you have a marker or whatever, a pen, whatever. If you have like on the Flintstones, like a chisel and a stone, whatever you have, I want you to make notes as we go, just on what you find interesting. What stands out to you, what that we read, if it's a word, if it's an image, if it's a phrase, did something provoke a question for you? What did you find interesting? What did you find confusing? Just those sorts of things. And then we're going to start at the beginning, and we're just going to work through this text together and see where it takes us. Does that sound remotely interesting to anyone? Awesome. I knew you were my crowd. Okay, so before we jump in, let me just recap Mark, where we've been so far. Jesus has launched a kingdom of God movement. And this movement for Jesus is about God's dream for the world. What would the world look like if God's will were done on earth as it is in heaven? And Jesus says that this kingdom vision isn't somewhere else, somewhen else for someone else, but this kingdom is here, it's now, and it's accessible to everybody. And the way we enter into it is we change our thinking. Change our thinking about God, change our thinking about ourselves, change our thinking about each other, change our thinking about the world. And begin to believe and trust that a different kind of world is actually possible. Last week we learned that Jesus, this kingdom message, this kingdom movement will not function like empire, right? We looked at the mustard seed and how in the idea, if you trace it down in Scripture, it had been that the kingdom of God would be like a big tall cedar tree. And when Jesus describes it, he's like, no, it's like a mustard shrub. And I gave you mustard seed last week, and Mary planted hers, and it's already growing, which has already, it's these two wiry little sprouts, and that's just a great metaphor for the kingdom of God, I think. Like it's growing, and it's happening even if you don't see it. So this week, Mark chapter 5, Jesus performs an exorcism, which is going to be our story, and Jesus also heals a woman who had an issue of bleeding, and he raised a dead girl back to life, like you do. And so that's Mark chapter 5. We're going to read the first 20 verses. So pay attention to what you find interesting as we go. They came to the other side of the sea. And I love how Mark so nonchalantly just says, they came to the other side of the sea. If you back up to chapter 4, they came to the other side of the sea after Jesus calmed the storm. Because the sea was choppy and they were afraid and they wondered if they were going to sink. And Jesus does this thing. And then Mark so nonchalantly just says, well, yeah, they came to the other side, to the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. The unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, stampeded down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. And then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the man possessed by demons sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Those who had seen what had happened to the man possessed by demons and to the swine reported it. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. Seen. How many of you heard this story before? It's kind of an interesting story. At 9 o'clock, after 9 o'clock, we did this whole exercise, and somebody said to me, when you were reading that, I had no idea what in the world it could possibly have meant. And by the end, he was like, hey, we did something together, so we're going to go somewhere today. Let's just begin with who wants to share a first observation? What stood out? We're going to put the text back up so you can, let's try to keep it to the beginning at this point. Who has something? It's okay to talk in church, Andy.
So for me, the phrase that caught my attention was when he says subdue him. Like, I mean, like how easy our society can push someone away so far from everything.
Yes.
That it's kind of an expectation that you have to be stepped down just because there's something wrong with you. And that kind of things really can destroy somebody's life, spirit, and emotions, and how much power the entire society can have one individual, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what shocked me.
Yeah, online we want you to participate too. And what Andy's talking about is this idea of people being, society can push people to the edges. And not only does it push people to the edges, but then ends up creating systems where there's a vested interest in keeping people on the edges. Would you agree? It's not just enough to get them there, but you end up creating systems where there are a group of people who benefit from the marginalization of other people. It's a very real thing. Yes?
One of the things that stuck out to me was talking about the howling and the bruising himself and the unclean spirit, that would be like self-harm.
Yeah.
And a lot of this could be about like mental health even. And, you know, like the restraints and stuff, like they were, especially in older days, they would restrain mentally ill people and they would think that they were possessed, but really they were just dealing like with depression and anxiety and things like that.
Yeah, and the idea that this is like a mental health episode, he's struggling with his mental health. I think that's pretty clear in the text that he's not well, right? Like he's in deep, deep, deep pain. I think that often, I mean, that's for people who the idea of literal demon possession is a bit, you know, and if you believe in literal, like you be you. I'm not going to approach this story from a literal understanding, but you can still approach this story from the way I'm going to show you eventually, even if you hold on to that, right? But I think one of the things that happens is people will say, oh, you know, what really was going on was this, and we try to diagnose. So I don't think we try to diagnose. I think we can say this person is in deep, deep pain. There's something going on. What I don't want us to do is say, well, he's struggling with his mental health, and then just move on. There is a reason he's struggling. And what I want to get to the core today is what is the reason he's struggling? What is the source? And I know, like, well, he's possessed by a demon. Yeah, but what does that mean? What is actually going on with that? So yeah, he's a person who's having a crisis and he's in deep pain, deep, deep pain. Yes?
So as I look at this, I look at the locations and the places, the other side of the sea, and some of this can be the writing conventions of how it's been interpreted, but I mean, in general, there's things that we're noticing, like the other side of the sea, the region of Gerasenes. I don't know where that is. I'm going to have to look that up.
I'm so glad you brought it up. I needed somebody to.
Okay, so, great. I followed the instructions. No. And when we saw Jesus from a distance, and so there's all this distance, and you know, the chains have been ripped apart, the things have been broken. There's a lot of just language that suggests that everything is broken and distant, and even just the acknowledgement of Jesus is talking to him, and that distance becomes less far away.
Yeah.
As time goes on, and he even acknowledges him as the person wants to be named as. He doesn't. Now he does say, "You unclean spirit," but he acknowledges him and he talks to him as that person presents.
Yeah.
And so there's just a contrast of the distance and how this person has been seen, and now he's being acknowledged and he's being seen, and it's kind of on his own terms, and that's just a thing that stands out.
Yeah, the distance. There's distance. And the region of the Gerasenes. How many of you are familiar with the region of the Gerasenes? Anybody? Like, I was just there last weekend. It was great. Now, here's what's interesting. Mark maybe made a mistake here, and here's why. The region of, this place, Gerasa, is 30 plus miles away from the Sea of Galilee. Which means, if Mark is right, and this is where it happens, Jesus casts the demon out into the pigs, who then have a 30-mile mini marathon, during which nobody could stop them and say, can we think about this? Where are you going? This is not a good... Right, so what does Mark mean? There are a couple other G name places around there. So it could be that Mark is really using this as a placeholder, like the region, like you tell people you're from Nashville, but you live like an hour and a half outside the city kind of deal. Or it could be just this idea that a scribe put the wrong name in later when they were doing a copy, or maybe Mark just didn't get it right. But this region is there, to go back to your point, there's a distance, right? This region is set even farther away from the sea, which is, I think, is interesting. It's also fascinating to me that Jesus keeps going and doing Jesus stuff, teaching all this stuff by the lake. He keeps going back to this body of water, and we'll talk a little bit about why, maybe what water might have represented. But you have to also think about it in terms of the lake was a significant hub for the community. Not just for like recreation. It wasn't just like they went out on the weekends and water skied and, that was how it worked. It was a significant hub because Jesus had several followers who were fishermen, right? They get their livelihood from the lake. And in Jesus' time, Herod Antipas, who was the ruler of this region, had just in the 20s commercialized the lake, which meant he took this place, this source, where people could feed their family and people could get, bring in a catch and then sell some, share some, whatever. And he commercialized it, which means it's making their ability to take care of themselves and be sustainable more difficult. Right? There's this thing that empires do, which is they make things more difficult and they make self-sustainability impossible. When I was in college, I had an anthropology class, and we were studying how the British, when they went into particular islands, they would go in and they would essentially say, look, we'll bring you your food. You just grow sugarcane. Don't grow anything else. And they took communities, and America's been guilty of this, of course, take communities that were self-sustaining. They grew their own food. They could nourish themselves. They didn't need outside support. They turned them into depending on them for their support, and then they starved them to death. That's how empire works. And so this lake would be a big issue. It was a source of a source of life, but it was also, in this particular era, I bet lots of people were having conversations about what Antipas had done to the lake, right? This would have been yes, Adam.
Yeah, I have a comment here from Dale Online. I actually have a few here. But to start, Dale Online is saying that he, for the first time, kind of had this idea that maybe Legion could represent bearing the weight of all of the oppressed people in the area.
Yeah, we're going to come to this idea of Legion and what that might mean. It's it's almost like Mark, up to this point, we're 5 chapters in. Now, Mark didn't write in chapters, right? But it's almost like up to this point, Mark's been like, I've been playing things a little, I've been keeping it, but now I'm going to go on the nose with this. I want you to understand what I'm talking about. And this whole idea of Legion is a pretty big deal. Do you have another one?
Yeah, and then I have just from quite a few people, they're mentioning all of the ideas of Gentiles, graveyards, pigs, mental illness, all alluding to an uncleanness outside of just the demon being unclean. Yeah,
let's take a look at this. So you have this person who is possessed by, and it's important, an unclean spirit. Now, lots of translations translate that evil spirit. Here's why that's a problem. There's a word in Greek for evil, and that ain't it. It's the actual word unclean. And so every translation is an interpretation, right? But I find it interesting because I went for years and years and years and never paid attention to the nuance of evil and unclean because they're not the same. Now, we have probably, many of us, you grew up Christian, you were given a caricature of Judaism, and that it's a caricature that is bound up in anti-Semitism and a misunderstanding of the Jewish tradition. And one of the ways that is reflected is in our understanding of things being clean or unclean or pure and impure. What does it mean to be clean or unclean? Generally, I was kind of taught that to be impure, to be unclean, was synonymous with being sinful. Anybody else? Like, if you're unclean, you're sinful. That's absolutely wrong. That's not true. That is not how Judaism ever thought about things. For example, there are lots of things that could happen to you on a daily basis that can make you unclean, right? If you had to take care of, if a loved one passed away and you were responsible for caring for their body, being in contact with death would make you unclean. Any kind of bodily discharge would make you unclean. Having sex would make you unclean. Almost anything you could do could accidentally make you unclean. It didn't make you sinful. That wasn't the case. Unclean simply meant this, that you could not go into the temple and worship without first being made clean. And do you know how you get made clean? You get in this thing called a mikveh, and you immerse yourself. It's where Christians get the idea of baptism. And you immerse yourself, and as you do that, usually 3 times, it purifies you, and now you can go. It's not sinful. It's not something you ask for forgiveness for. It's just that life is messy. I'm going to go do this ritual, and now I'm pure. But there is this sense in these stories, this person is unclean, and people would avoid unclean people. It was common, not because they were sinful, but because for some people, like the story after this one is a woman who had an issue of bleeding and it wouldn't stop. That issue of bleeding made her unclean. She wasn't sinful, but yet because of her uncleanness, people kept her at a distance. And the same thing is going on with this particular person, right? He shows up and he is possessed by an unclean spirit. He's hanging out in tombs, which means he's hanging out around death, which would also be unclean. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, he's harming himself. This person is deeply troubled, deeply hurt, and also unclean, which means a distance is all he gets, right? He's not, you ever done this where you know if you make eye contact with somebody, you have to talk to them? And so you do this, everything you can to avoid making eye contact. This is the guy you don't make eye contact with. And this is the guy who you need him to stay at a distance, because if you are going to have, like, let's say you're going to go worship, you need to be able to have access. And if you can't go, right? So this whole idea of being unclean is at the core of this story and the next story. What Jesus does with unclean people. Now, what culture did with unclean people is you keep them over here at a distance, and you keep them over here at a distance because the assumption is that their impurity, their lack of cleanness is contagious. That you will get what they've got. It will happen to you. And so people, you keep them at a distance, you keep them away, you keep them at bay to protect yourself from getting whatever uncleanness is on them. Does that make sense? And so this story, and the whole thing takes place in a region that was a Gentile region, and you can't get more unclean than Gentiles. Bad news if you're a Gentile. You can't get more unclean than Gentiles. And so this is like, it's almost like Mark is saying, I need you to understand how unclean this whole situation is. We're in Gentile territory. We're in the tombs. It's a guy who's possessed by an unclean spirit. All of this is really, really bad. All of this is something we need to keep our distance from. And what we're going to see is what Jesus does with that distance. Anybody else? Yes.
So much symbolism in here, but I think it's telling
that this is all set with this man running through the tombs and in the graveyard. And I think that's indicative of when we deny our true nature, which is our God nature, and our own purity and our own divine communion with God. But I think it's also telling that he immediately recognized Jesus instantaneously. So that tells me that we always have the ability to know that illumination, that's unbroken, it can't be broken, that connection, that divine communion is always there for us.
That's
But
right.
somehow he had to agree to and believe in what people were thinking of him, you know, in order to make the choices to live as he was living. But I love that Jesus always just recognizes the truth of us. And there's that instantaneous homecoming, you know, that instantaneous, you know, yes, and salvation. And that he was willing to accept it and receive it and know the truth of himself, that he was worthy and a divine child of God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, that we looked a couple weeks ago, this idea that in the Gospel of Mark, the people you would expect to get Jesus don't. His family, his disciples, you know, the religious leaders. The people you would expect to not get Jesus, demons, totally know who he is. And he has some sort of power over them, right? Like this guy shows up immediately and he's like, hey, whatever you do, please don't torment me. As if Jesus has the power to torment him, as if Jesus has the power to do something that would be unpleasant for this particular demon. Now, I want to turn our attention real quick to the name. I think Dale mentioned the name earlier. My name is Legion, for we are many. That word legion is a Roman military term. A legion was a detachment of about 6,000 soldiers. Now, what are we supposed to understand from this? Why in the world, when Jesus asks, what is your name? He says legion. What do you think Mark wants us to see? I mean, is Mark like, this guy's really possessed? There's possessed, and then there's legion possessed. This guy really did it right when he played with that Ouija board when he was, he used that magic 8 ball, and then it was just watch Harry Potter, listen to Taylor Swift, and then this is what happens for you. You just end up, my name is Legion, for we are many. May help to understand something else about this particular place. So in Mark's day, this region would have sent off all sorts of bells and whistles for Mark's audience, because when the war began, when the Jews revolted against Rome in the year 66, and they started to have some success, when Rome came to retake the land, Rome came with some legions through northern Palestine, which is where we are. So when we hear legion here, for us, it's like, look at, Mark's doing something there. It's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. For Mark's audience, this is the territory where Rome's legions came in and ended up going on a brutal campaign of just killing everything that moved, of crucifying everybody they could get their hands on. And they eventually go to Jerusalem with these legions, they destroy the city and they destroy the temple. So for Mark's audience, when they heard legions, they're not just thinking, well, that's an interesting, they are probably remembering 4 weeks ago when the Roman legions came to town and ransacked everything and killed everyone. Right? So there's something going on here. Mark is, this idea of legion, I think, is a big deal in this story. And if Mark has been a little coy up to this point, he's starting to say, hey, I've got something, I don't want you to miss it. There's something about Jesus and what Jesus is doing that has something to say with this whole idea of a legion. Let's go to the next slide. Anything about this particular part of the text that you find interesting? We're not in kosher land anymore because the demons want to be sent into swine. What do you think about that? Anything stand out about this particular Jesus being like, yeah, you can go get in those pigs.
I mean, if Mark is trying to be, if he's talking about Rome, he's not mincing any words at this point.
Yeah. So if you're unaware, in Judaism, there are certain foods that are clean and certain foods that are unclean, right? Not sinful, clean, unclean. Swine, pigs, are unclean. And so you're fully in Gentile territory, and we are now dealing with a man who is possessed by a legion, is living in the tombs in Gentile territory, and now the thing that's occupying this guy is being sent into the pigs. What's that?
It's not a compliment. It's not a compliment.
Yeah, it's not a compliment.
Calling the Romans swine.
Yeah, I don't, like, if anybody says, hey, you're swine, you don't like, oh, thank you. I love bacon. It's nice to be associated with it. This whole thing is building a particular narrative for Mark. Mark wants us to see Jesus as somehow having something to do with legion. And what does Jesus do with the legion? He puts them into the pigs, and the pigs do what? They run into the water and drown. Isn't that an interesting response? Here's something else you need to know about water. In the ancient world, water, bodies of water, the ocean especially, but a sea like this, would be full of, it would make people nervous. It would make people nervous because it was unmanageable. And it would make people nervous because you could never predict. How many of you, when you woke up this morning, you looked at the weather to see what was going to happen? Yeah. Can you imagine for our ancestors, not that long ago, like they weren't waking up that groundhog for sport. It was like serious. What's the weather going to be? I don't know. Go grab the groundhog. Because they didn't know. Like every day was like living in Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You had no idea what was going to happen. The weather, everything. You were at the whim of whatever the weather's going to be today. I think 2 days ago, there was an earthquake in Hawaii and there was an earthquake in Los Angeles. And when earthquakes happened, they released a statement right away that said, there are going to be some aftershocks. There is no tsunami warning. Isn't it cool that we can do that? Like, hey, this is not going to, you go way, 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 way back. If there's an earthquake, a little time later, you may not have any idea it's coming, but suddenly the water starts to pull back, and then it comes rushing in, and everyone and everything you know gets taken away. The sea became symbolic of chaos. In the Bible, in the apocalyptic books, like the book of Revelation, 10 of 10 don't recommend. But the way the book of Revelation ends, there's this picture of a new heaven and a new earth. And there's this little line that the author says, which is, there's no longer any sea. Anybody read that before and think, well, that's a bummer. New heaven, new earth, and you get rid of the sea? It's like one of the best parts. It's like, I love the sea. I love the ocean. Why would you get rid of it? In the ancient world, it's symbolic of political chaos. Symbolic of political chaos. When you're in the ocean, when you're in the water, anything's possible. And that's not necessarily a good thing. And so in the vision of the new heaven and the new earth, there is no political turmoil. There is no political chaos. Peace reigns on earth. Now, Rome, when they first came to Palestine, would have come by boat. What does it mean for Jesus to cast a legion into some pigs and send them running for the water? Send them back where they came from. Send them back where they came from. Do you understand what Jesus is doing? By the way, let's go to the next slide. I always found this interesting. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave the neighborhood. Is that what you do here? You just watch Jesus do this thing? Why are you not saying, look, I think we've got a little side hustle here. We'll keep bringing people. You keep healing them and throwing stuff in the water, and we'll do well together. No. This happens, and immediately they're like, this guy got to go. What do they get that we don't get? Richard Rohr says that we can't see what we were taught not to look for. How many of you in this room or listening online were explicitly taught that the stories of Jesus were not political? And that did I just give you a holler and if you read them as having some sort of political nature, then you're importing something on the text that wasn't there to begin with. And yeah, I think Mark's over here screaming, actually, y'all, I think Jesus has something to say about what we do about Rome. The question everybody wakes up with in Mark's world, in Jesus' world, is what do we do about Rome? What do we do about Rome? These people came here, they have taken our land, they have put us, they've taken our economy, they have wrecked it all, and they've put us under their power. What do we do about them? How do we resist them? In Mark's world, a group of people said, here's how we resist them. We kill more of them than they can kill of us. That's how we'll resist Rome. We will kill them. And Mark is writing a story about Jesus sending some demons into some pigs in the aftermath of what happens when you try to out-empire empire. Because that's what this story is about. Mark, totally on the nose, totally being obvious, is saying, look, I think the Jesus story is about what we do with Rome. I think Jesus is giving us a vision. I think Jesus is giving us a plan. And I think Jesus is giving us a path. And that path and that plan is not to kill them. The path and the plan is to love one another, to build generous communities of embrace, and to resist them non-violently. There is a reason why what Jesus does isn't just, hey, we're going to go resist Rome non-violently, be there Tuesday. There's a reason he does it like this. You know that person over there that you've been taught is dangerous, unclean, unsafe for you? The one you've been taught to keep at the edges and keep away? Yeah, I want you to bring them in. Because if we're going to resist the empire, it's going to take all of us caring for one another really, really well. If we're going to resist the empire, we've got to stop playing by their economic rules. So when people ask me about taxes and if I pay them, I'm not ever going to have a coin because I don't carry that coin. But here's what I do. I do create a community where everybody has a seat at the table and where everybody is loved and embraced and included. And our resistance of the empire does not begin with just better political ideas. Our resistance is deep in our bodies, and it has to do with who we center, who we include, and who we exclude, which is no one. Which is no one.
Everyone is in.
Everyone is in, Lee. That'll preach. And the next story, the very next story, is a woman who has had an issue of bleeding for 12 years. Again, Mark, 12 disciples, 12 tribes. I think like Mark's just like, you know what, I'm tired of trying to be fancy. I'm just going to give it to you. And she has been held at the margins for 12 years. 12 years of not being hugged, 12 years of not being seen, 12 years of not being included, 12 years of being looked at as the problem, as a danger to the general public. And she crawls through a crowd of people. Do you get the image here? She's crawling through, touching people, and what's happening to them as she touches them? It is a tidal wave of impurity, of uncleanness. Can you imagine what happens to her if they find out that it's her who, which is why when Jesus feels a jolt, and I always like to imagine he like responds like Cosmo Kramer, like he feels this jolt. And then what happens? He stops, record scratches, and he says, okay, somebody touched me, who was it? And the disciples are like, Jesus, there's like a bajillion people. It's a technical theological number. There are a bajillion people here. Everybody touched you. And he's like, no. Somebody touched me in such a way that I felt energy. This was not just a brush or a bump. This was faith. Something happened, right? And then this woman, trembling, comes before Jesus, knowing that she has just been she has publicly made the entire crowd unclean. And what Jesus does next was a game changer. He picks her up, he embraces her, he calls her daughter, and he says, your faith, your trust has made you well. You are now healed. And look, I don't know what you believe. I struggle with literal physical healings. I do. That's a struggle of mine. I don't know what I think about that. But I do think Jesus was a healer. And I think that what Jesus did in that moment is he embraces this woman who has not been embraced in 12 long years, is he heals her socially. That's why he has to call it out. That's why he has to stop. That's why he has to make a fuss. That's why he has to draw all attention on her. Because in this moment, every eye on her, this unclean woman who has been kept at a distance, he reaches over and embraces her, and he calls her daughter. And essentially what he says to them is, you have thought that there was something wrong with her that was contagious, that there was something unclean that she would pass on to you. And just imagine him standing there with a side hug because Jesus went through purity culture. And he's saying to them, this woman, this thing you're afraid of, not a thing. In fact, not only is her uncleanness not contagious for you, it's actually cleanness that's contagious. Her impurity is not contagious for you. It's actually purity that is contagious. This woman, this person you've excluded, you've been taught religiously that you have to leave her out. And I'm telling you, in the kingdom of God, people just like her have always been in, and they've always been centered, and they've always been beloved. And this system we have created that keeps some out and some in, that teaches us to be afraid of people who are not like us, this system we have created, this thing called empire, that we end up pretending and believing like we have to play by these rules. To believe that she's the problem. To believe that the best way you can be faithful to God is by excluding as many people like her as possible. That ain't it. And I don't know whether this story literally happened, but I do know that time and again in the life of Jesus, people, real human beings who had been told they were unworthy, who had been told they were unlovable, who had been told they could not belong, found themselves standing side by side with a religious leader who was supposed to cast them out, who instead held them closer and closer and closer and closer and kept insisting that this is how we push back on empire. We push back on empire by not playing by their rules. We create a different way of being human. We create a way of being human that doesn't see anybody as collateral damage, but that pulls everybody close in the embrace of God's love. I think that's what Jesus is doing here. And I think the unfortunate bit is that message is explicitly political. It's explicitly political. And we have been sold a gospel that is about how to get you a really good afterlife scenario when Jesus was trying to transform the world. No wonder when Constantine, the freaking Roman emperor, took the whole thing over, y'all, and then told us, no. This is not about politics. This is about believing these things in this creed so that you can go to heaven when you die. You leave the world to me. And I'll leave you to God. And we created a system, a religion, that would look at teaching like this, teaching by somebody like Howard Thurman and say, well, that's completely inappropriate because it's political. The gospel is inherently political. And I think we need now, in this cultural moment, we need a political gospel that looks at the world and says, you know what? It is absolutely unacceptable that there are people who do not have houses. We should actually build housing for them. That oh my gosh, that there are people who have to decide whether or not they're going to get health care or lose everything they have. There are people who are trying to decide, like, we're trying to make it harder for people to have access to education. We're trying to make it harder for people to just survive. I need a gospel that speaks to that. And here's what I don't need. I don't need a gospel that is just petty. And I tend to want to be petty. Anybody else? So the other day on Facebook, somebody said something to me. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't very nice. The thing I got fixated on was that they said "you're" and they meant "you are," but they spelled it wrong. It took every fiber of my being to not go, "you're." It was a struggle. I don't know why. I wanted to get into the pettiness of it. I wanted petty. I wanted to show that I was smarter because I know where the apostrophe goes, or that there even should be one. I'm smarter. We get so in this, and we end up missing the big deal. Let me tell you right now, this Christian nationalism and MAGA is a clear and present threat to our country and to the lives of every single American, whether they know it or not. The biggest threat is not the former president's bad spray tan. And we get so lost in the weeds on stuff that doesn't matter. And we end up giving away everything that does. We need a gospel that says, actually, we disagree with this, but what we're being offered over here actually isn't human flourishing. It is just this little thing to make us feel better because we voted the right way or we had the right opinion, when the reality is we need a world, a country, we need a place where everybody's included and nobody gets left out and nobody has to decide whether or not they're going to feed their family or pay for their health insurance. Or we need a gospel that transforms society, not just for Christians, because a good gospel will not be Christian. A good gospel will be human, and it will look at all of God's beloved children and find a place for them, not once they've signed off on the right doctrinal statements, but for their sheer existence. I think this story, what makes a great story is that you can read a couple meanings into it, right? I think one of the meanings of this story is that this is what Jesus and his movement were like, continually going to the people forgotten, the people marginalized, the people left out, and bringing them in the center. And my goodness, if we're going to follow Jesus, how can we do anything else? I'm more and more convinced that our problem is not that we've gone too far. We just hadn't gone far enough, because there are people still outside the table, still outside the village, who have not yet been told the good news that they are loved, beloved, celebrated, embraced right here, right now, just as they are. There are people who don't know that yet. We haven't gone far enough. We haven't told enough people. And yet I also think there's this political implication that if we are going to really follow Jesus, this kind of discomfort. I realized, I gave a sermon over the pandemic. It was the story of the widow's mite. You all know that story where Jesus sees this woman, she gives her last 2 pennies, and he's like, look, she gave more than everybody else, and we all applaud her. And then usually somebody comes out and says, now about the building program. Not equal gifts, equal sacrifice. How many of y'all have been through that, like bait and switch, right? And I gave a sermon where I said, I think we've got that story wrong. I don't think Jesus is praising the woman. I think he's condemning the system that would take away the last little bit she has. And I ended that sermon by saying, I think I know what all this means, and it makes me really uncomfortable because it means my life has to change. Not my beliefs alone. But as long as there are people who are giving away their last 2 pennies to survive, then my life has to change if I want to take Jesus seriously. Your life has to change if we want to take Jesus seriously. I get why it's much easier to boil this down to a religious decision you make about where you go when you die. Because if we boil it down to that, it doesn't really affect the life you live every other day, does it? I mean, no. And you can say all the right things and people will think you're super proper and kind and generous. The real question is, would we beg Jesus to leave the neighborhood?
they were not joyous that a man that had been tormenting the town was okay now. They were more upset about the economics.
Yeah, Adam said in between services that they were more concerned about property rights than the person who'd been liberated from.
Part of their food source.
Yeah. And that's what we end up doing, isn't it? We end up valuing things that really aren't the value. Anything we place above human beings, anything that we value more than the flourishing of even our worst enemy, ends up being falsely placed value.
Plus, they were gonna have to change their opinion about that man, which sometimes we don't change our opinions that easily.
Yeah, they're going to have to stop looking away. They're going to have to start seeing him. They're going to have to make space for the messiness of human relationship. Yeah. Any last thoughts?
That's really hard.
You know what? I think that's why when, we give the rich young ruler a lot of flack, don't we? Like he goes up to Jesus, what do I have to do to experience eternal life? Jesus is like, just give away all your stuff, give it to the poor and follow me. And we're like, we would totally do that, Jesus. We would totally do that, Jesus. Of course we would. Would we? I think we need to give the guy a break. It's hard. It's a scary decision. What do I really do? Do I change my life? Do we change the way the neighborhood functions? Or do we just ask Jesus to leave so we can keep our proper Jesus-centered worship experience? Because Jesus gets in the way of worshiping Jesus. Right? Jesus gets in the way of worshiping Jesus. Because he keeps insisting, I think the point was following me to begin with, wasn't it? I think the point was following. Last thing right here.
I love how it says, and those who had seen what happened, that didn't say it deeply resonated with them. No, they reported it. They reported, and that just such a clinical, I don't know. I think of a couple memes that pop to mind where people complain about things. I'm just thinking of that idea of report. Report just enforces that hierarchy of submitting tickets and getting rules and regulations and empire, and so it's they were very entrenched in the system of this context. They weren't changed by it. They reported it.
Right. They made a choice, and the choice was, this works well for us when people aren't sending our pigs into the water. So we're going to get more pigs and just keep doing this, as opposed to changing the system. And I'll be honest with you, what I want to be a part of, and I don't know how to do it. I don't know even for sure what it looks like, but I want to be a part of a church that says no to empire. I want to be a church that says no to empire and yes to actually following Jesus into all the messiness, the difficulty, the beauty, the grace, and the goodness. I want to be a part of a community, and I think we're building that here, where Jesus is embracing the people through us who nobody has embraced in a very long time. Yeah. Shane, did you have something? Oh, okay. All right. More of that. So was this fun at all? Interesting at all? Yeah? Yeah? Great. Okay. We're not going to do this every week, but I thought maybe for once it might be fun to see what we came up with if we did. Let's pray. God, for those of us who still think that following Jesus has something left to offer us, something to do, something that can change us, transform us, may we be very unsatisfied with any understanding of the Jesus story, any understanding of what good news might mean that is not this radical call to nonviolent, compassionate, generous love. May we take Jesus so seriously that it makes things more difficult, that it presents us with difficult decisions. And may we know that in choosing love, in choosing justice, in choosing this path, that we are a part of the healing of the world. We are grateful. We offer this in Jesus' name. And everybody said,
In the silence, tell me, can you hear the voices calling out of the disappeared? Broken spirits, dormant dreams. How much longer will justice sleep when a lawless heart is the voice we're hearing? We need freedom, freedom, freedom. How much longer till we sing a new song? How much longer? How much longer till we sing a new song? Hearts of saints and sinners too, both have walked away from the destitute. Call them back, or to sing as one, a song of freedom now, a song to overcome. When a lawless heart is the voice we're hearing, we need freedom, freedom, freedom.
We all stand and sing this.
How much longer till we sing a new song? Oh, how much longer till we sing a new song? Come on, people, lay your weapons down, where the river of justice flows and all oppression drowns. It flows with life, with love and truth. May the old be washed away and hearts be made anew. Yeah, come on, people, lay your weapons down, where the river of justice flows and all oppression drowns. It flows with life, with love and truth. May the old be washed away and hearts be made anew. And a lawless heart is the voice we're hearing. We need freedom. We need freedom. We need freedom. Freedom. How much longer till we sing a new song? Oh, how much longer till we sing a new song? How much longer till we sing a new song? Oh, how much longer till we sing a new song? One more time, sing. How much longer till we sing a new song?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Grace Point, thank you for being with us. We hope you leave challenged and encouraged and all of those things. Have a good week. We love you. We'll see you back next time.
on and follow. Come on, heavy lady, don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people, come on and follow. Oh, leave all of your trouble, leave all of your sorrow, set down your burden. Oh, come on and follow. Come on, heavy lady, don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people, come on and follow. Oh, come on, all you people, come on and follow.